Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. I'm Matt Holinsky. Glad you could join us here today. We have a great guest for us today. This gentleman played in the early to mid 60s for Trott Vocational. Wasn't a star on the team, and that's the angle of our story because backup players were just as important to these teams as well too. From his home in New Mexico, please welcome Larry Kolek. Larry, good to have you with me.
It's great to be here.
Trott Vocational.
I was going over some of my old things. Actually, I'll show you a couple old photographs I came across.
Wow. Trott Vocational. For people who aren't familiar with Trott Vocational, tell us about it.
Trott Vocational was a vocational school in the true sense of the word. Most high schools had programs which they called industrial arts, which was maybe a print shop, wood shop, ceramics, art, whatever the case may be. But a vocational school was actually a half a day of a vocational program, whether it be auto mechanics, welding, electrical, machine shop, drafting. They had nursing. I was in a program called the Millwright program, which was a 3-year program that involved carpentry, metalworks, rigging, welding, and a full year of actual machine shop work with lathes and milling machines and all that kind of stuff. So it was prepared to get you into industry as a journeyman or something of that nature. And most of those that graduated from there didn't go on to further education. But my father was in the refrigeration air conditioning business, and that was my goal. So I was going to go to a Niagara Community College, or actually it was Erie County Community College, because Niagara Community College wasn't even there at that time. And take air conditioning refrigeration. But one day we had a careers day, like in early spring of my senior year. And there was a person that came there from Alfred and really piqued my interest. So I took my New York State Regency tests and I got a scholarship, and I talked my father into letting me go to Alfred, and I actually graduated from Alfred. And actually I even taught there after to pick up some more credits. And I taught in Alfred. And but Trott was a very unique place. It was very similar to some of the schools that we have today, in essence, where they wanted to send some people that were not on the further education track. And so we had some misfits, of course, but for the most part, the people that wanted to get stuff out of it became very successful. I loved high school. I never missed a day. I was very active in all the activities. I was very active in our senior class, and we only had about 65 people in our senior class. And I only had 4 people actually in my group, and one of them passed away in the senior year. But it was very different kind of school. Teachers were really teachers back then. There was physical contact, if I can say. You didn't do stuff, you assumed the position. And the only ones that didn't have to was football players. Maybe that's why I went on the football team.
Whereabouts did you grow up in Niagara Falls or the Wheatfield?
I actually grew up in the town of Wheatfield. And my school that I was supposed to go to was Niagara Wheatfield High School. I went there for 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. But I would catch the bus in the morning out front of my house on Niagara Falls Boulevard, about a mile from Bell Aircraft. I was right next to the Boulevard Theater, our house was. And we would catch a bus and go to the high school, Niagara Wheatfield High School. And then we would all of us would get off, and we would catch another bus that would take us to Niagara Falls, which would drop us off in Trott. So it was a long journey every day. And then we would do and it varied. 1 year we would have our basic classes, math, history, English, science in the morning, and then our shop would be in the afternoon. And that alternated from year to year. Some days we'd have shop in the morning and classes in the afternoon, and it went back and forth. But we were there for 3 years. And then in the evening, when we were ready to go, Trott was actually sort of downtown of Niagara Falls. It was on Highland Avenue, I think, I believe. And we would, the bus would take me from there about 2 miles down to Hyde Park, which it's still there. It's a big park. And there was a stadium there. And that's where we had football practice. So they would drop me off on the corner, walk over a couple blocks to footballers in the basement underneath the bleachers. And there were showers there. And we would have our equipment manager would have all of our stuff, and we would dress, and then we would go out and practice out in the open areas. We never practiced inside the stadium. It was taboo. We weren't even allowed in there until football day, until a game day. But we would practice out in the outside of the stadium, and usually practice started for about 3:30 and would end at 5:30, 5:45, or when it was really getting dark. Well, this was in 1962, 63, and 64. I was younger when I was there, and I didn't have a driver's license yet because I graduated when I was 17. You had to be 16 to get a driver's license. So my sophomore year, I didn't have a driver's license. But we didn't have Uber, we didn't have Ride, we didn't have any of those kind of facilities. So I had to go from Hyde Park Stadium and walk over to Pine Avenue, and the corner of Pine Avenue and Hyde Park Boulevard, and I'd hitchhike home every night. And I did that for 3 years, every single night. We had football practice, and sometimes I would get a ride, and there were no buses. There were no city buses that were going that way. But many times I'd be out there for an hour or 2 hours before I get home at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and then do chores and homework at night, and then start all over again the next day. And but it was that way: rain, snow. I made a goal of myself not to miss one practice. I wasn't very good. I was too small. I was about 5'9" probably back then. I weighed about 140, 145 pounds. And I wanted to play offense, but all of our offensive players were much better than I was. Earl Perna was the fullback, and he was my best friend. And but he was like Man Mountain Dean. He was a bear in the woods. But I was used on the practice team for tackling and playing outside linebacker and all that kind of stuff. And so I played a little bit in the game days, I would play a little bit of defense. I probably played 1 or 2 plays of offense during those days. But like I said, we had a small team, and we tried. I mean, we played teams: Kenmore East, Kenmore West, Lockport, LaSalle, Niagara Falls High School, North Tonawanda, all the big schools, which had hundreds and hundreds of students to pick from to play the football team, and we had maybe 20 people that were interested in playing football. So it was a very select team and real dedicated guys, and a lot of them became very close friends of mine.
You played for Orlando, Babe Mazza. Talk about playing for Coach Mazza back then.
We used to call him the Babe, and he was. It's really hard to describe, but the one thing that I remember, he got drafted and he played professional football. He played for Michigan State also, but the thing that I can remember to this day, he says, "I'm designing every running play to be a touchdown." And wasn't possible, but that was his philosophy. And he was very dedicated, very strong person. He didn't like slackers, and he paid his dues, and he loved the players that were loyal to him. So it was an experience, believe me. The things that we did back then you couldn't do today. They're just not acceptable. The kinds of things that took place back in the '60s with keeping people in line, make them do things. But there was a lot of I don't know. It's just today it would be a lot of people would be looking down on some of that kind of stuff, but it was something that we lived with. It was something that we enjoyed doing, and I wouldn't trade a second of it.
How was the tradition against and the rivalry playing against Niagara Falls and LaSalle?
Yeah, we would really get up for those games, especially Niagara Falls. Especially when we also played basketball. I didn't play basketball, but a lot of the players that were on excuse me, there. A lot of the players that played football also played basketball because we only had like 6 or 7 basketball players. And that Coach Mazza would take them around in his station wagon to take it. We didn't have travel buses back then. When we went to a game, we had to get transportation to go to games and stuff like that. But it was a big rivalry. There was always situations because we even had kids from Niagara Falls that actually came to Trott. But since they were only like about 6 or 7 blocks away from us where the old high school was compared to where Trott was, we would run into some of their players now and then when we were down at the local restaurants or whatever the case may be. So, but it was the games that I remember the most were Tonawanda, playing against Rick Casada. I was telling a friend of mine I just called today that's in Florida, and she went to school with me, and I told her today that I was going to be doing this. And actually, it was for my girlfriend when I was in high school, and we still stay in contact after all these years. But I told her that Rick Casada was probably the Tom Brady of the '60s, and went on to play in the Canadian Football League. He opened up a restaurant just about a mile from my house. An old restaurant, turned it into a wing and all that kind of place. I said hello to him whenever I went to a restaurant when he was there. But he was the kind of guy that he could live off his reputation. He was and I understand that he was a pretty good guy. So, but boy, he could play football. I mean, he was the kind of guy like Brady or just like Mahomes. It would get down to the last minute of the game, and they were down 3 points, and he would pull a touchdown out somehow.
Yeah.
So, and I know that you did an interview with Rick, so I think maybe you got the same impression.
A very confident man in his day, playing football. He looks fondly back on those days as well too. What was the equipment like? What were the playing conditions like at Hyde Park Stadium during that time period?
Well, since we didn't have training rooms, we didn't have any weight rooms, and we didn't have any outside storage facilities to put stuff. We had to carry our stuff in to the stadium storage building underneath the stadium. So we would have some tackling dummies. We had some guard pads that the guys used to bump up against. I think we had one sled, and I don't remember where we kept that. I think we took the pads off of it and brought them in. But very limited equipment that we could use. I mean, I don't ever remember us having any of the tire kind of thing where you run through them and step through. I don't remember ever doing that. We did a lot of wind sprints, but in our physical equipment, we would have knee pads, thigh pads. The running backs had hip pads. We had pretty shabby shoulder pads, and then probably an unacceptable now helmet, which just had the suspension top to it, and one bar across the front, and a mouthpiece, which we had to buy. So, but it was 1960, 61, 62, 63. Go back and look at the NFL, just see what happened. Go back to the hockey leagues. I used to go to the hockey games. Goalies didn't wear masks or any of that kind of stuff. So a lot of that stuff was the only problem I ever had was I dislocated a shoulder, my right shoulder. I forget, probably my junior year, I think it was. And they just came over, popped it back into place, and we just kept on playing. So just practice. It was at a practice. It wasn't at a football game. It was at a practice. But
were the practices harder than the games?
Oh, in some cases, yeah. The guys that played offense, our offensive lines, were big boys. And we had Tom King, and I mean, he was, like 6'4", maybe 240 pounds. He was like a tight end. And they would patch him, and hear me, 145-pound guy, have to go out and tackle him. And it was Coach Mazza's philosophy: you play the game like they're the enemy, and you tackle them. don't give them any passes. no freebie running. No freebie catching the ball. You play just like if this was game. So
hey, I want to go back to team discipline, and you mentioned things that probably couldn't be done today. With going back then, was the use of hot ointment used to get people in line or pull pranks on them, or how is the hot ointment used?
I don't think it was much as a discipline deal, because guys were not doing what they're basically supposed to. I think it was more an attention getting, that you're not doing the play basically as it was designed to be played. I mean, he didn't get guys for fooling around or stuff like that. But if you went up and you were running a T-37 slant and you went the wrong way, he would come over and he would pull your chin strap off and snap you on the top of the helmet with the chin strap. So you get that echoing inside your ear. You knew that he got your attention, saying, boom. What hole were you supposed to go through? So, and the other kind of thing is that if he's seen you slacking in not doing your performance, we did a lot of wind sprints, 50-yard wind sprints. You'd say do 10 wind sprints, and that meant up and back 10 times. So you're 100 yards every one, so you're going 1,000 yards. And then at the end of practice, which was just short of normal, it was about a mile, I believe, around. You would start the practice with a run around the facility or around the park, and then we would end the day by that run around the park. So it was, and there was, he would get your attention by maybe giving you a little nudge here and there. I don't remember any, like fisticuffs or physical kind of stuff like that, but he might use a little bit of verbiage that wouldn't be acceptable today. So,
were you guys go by the days of the salt tablets and withholding water during practice in the summertime? It got pretty hot in August.
Well, we didn't have a water boy during practice, I can tell you that. And I don't remember us truthfully, I don't remember the salt tablet deals. I knew that was some of the stuff that was going on, but I don't remember that. But we didn't have water boys that were there. There was a drinking fountain out. If you were thirsty, you'd have to run about 200 or 300 yards to go out and ask them if you could go get water. But it was a little bit more physical than that. We just didn't have the facilities of Gatorade or any of that kind of stuff. So I think the biggest thing we do is at a ball game when we went, they'd have oranges. That was the big deal back then, sliced oranges. But we didn't have any. The other thing is, like I said, we didn't have any training. Like you have training now, where they take these athletes and they want to check on their diet, making sure they're getting the proper exercise, and doing all that stuff. We didn't have any coaching to that aspect. We didn't have anything that went through and said, you should be eating this, or this should be your diet before the game. You should be drinking this, or weightlifting, or any. We didn't have any of that stuff. So,
was Coach Mazza's background with Michigan State the connection to get guys college scholarships to play football at Michigan State? Roger Haley came ahead of you.
No, I don't think so. No, as a matter of fact, he very rarely talked about his background in college or in the professional sports. He, I think, was basically just interested in the existing time that they had playing for him there. It wasn't something for post performances that I can recall. Now, like I said, I wasn't. After I think about this, and I think I mentioned this to the other day, is I was more like a Rudy kind of guy. I was out there. I was the tackling dummy. I was the guy that went out and did this, did that, played very little. And I was just fortunate that I could suit up for a game. But it was his philosophy to play the best players that he could get. And some of them weren't the best in the league, but it was the best that he could get. And even to the dying end, I mean, I would get in maybe the last couple minutes of a game when we were so far out of it that we couldn't, there was nothing we could do. But I think if he was talking to some of the starters on what could be happening in post performances, that I wasn't aware of that. So,
being a backup player like you were, what life lessons did you take forward with that for being a backup player, a tackling dummy, as you called yourself in the past, or just a second stringer? What do you learn from that and take forward into life?
That's a good question. I don't regret that I was a second stringer. Matter of fact, people that ask me about my high school and stuff, I'm very proud to tell them I didn't play very well. But the thing that it was, I think the main thing that stuck with me was the perseverance to stick it out. Don't give up. I could have missed a lot of practices when it was raining, and I wasn't going to play anyways, basically. So, I mean, they weren't going to hurt me by saying, "Oh, if you don't go to practice, you aren't going to play." But that wasn't the thing anymore. I mean, it's when I set goals to do stuff, that's what I tried to accomplish. It's like back in the late '60s, after I went to work about 1969. I was a project manager for a company, and a real good friend of mine was smoking. And I started off in an architect's office, and all he could do back then was drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. And so I got into, when I was about 16 years old, to start smoking cigarettes. And this gentleman and I that I went to work with, he was smoking. And so one day I said to him, I said, we should quit smoking. And he said, okay. He said, I bet you $10. So that was in 1969. And I haven't had a cigarette since. And the gentleman died from lung cancer. And because about a month later, he gave me $10. But I haven't had a cigarette since 1969, and it was just something that was me. It didn't have anything to do with anybody else. Didn't have anything to do with health issues. It didn't have anything to do with doctor's requirements. It was a goal that I set for myself, and I've done this basically through life. When I moved out of New York and moved to New Mexico and started businesses out here, I gave up my teaching career that I had in New York and started completely fresh and just kept on going. And I'm 76 years old, and 6 years ago I started another venture in another country. So it's something that my father was very persistent on, is that you got to be honest to yourself and honest to the people you work with. So
going back, when you meet people and you start talking about your high school days, and it's a high school that doesn't exist anymore, what do you tell people about Trott Vocational, and what do you tell them about growing up in the Niagara Falls area?
Wow. It's pretty, I try to describe Trott as actually, when I went to work, when I went to work as a teacher, I actually went to work in a vocational school, which was called Niagara Frontier League. And that was in 1976. I had a phone call at our little place in Sanborn with about two air conditioning service places listed in the phone book. We actually had phone books back then. So this gentleman called and asked my father, he says, do you want to come and teach school? And he said, no, I don't want to do it, but maybe my son will. And so I went and visited with him. So in 1976, I went to go teach a program at the Orleans Bourses, which was called CETA. And what it was a government deal that was set up to teach displaced workers a new trade. And so I wrote a curriculum for heating and air conditioning, and I taught that for 2 years. And in 1978, I was approached by the high school, or the Niagara Frontier system, they wanted to start a program at their new school and asked me if I would do that. So I said I would do that. And I ended up starting a program in Sanborn. And I actually ended up starting the program. I'd teach there in the morning, and then I would drive from there and go to Medina. And I started the program in Medina. So I did that a year. I'd travel every day during my lunch hour to go from Sanborn to Medina every single day to teach school. And then it got to the next year, because we're going to have two. I had to pick, where do I want to teach? And I lived in Sanborn, just a couple blocks away from the schools. I said, I'm going to teach in Sanborn. So I ended up teaching in Sanborn, and then I was at the same time I was teaching night school. I was going 2 nights a week to the University of Buffalo to get my master's degree, and then I was teaching the other nights adult education, and then I was going on site once a week to chemical companies and teaching people to get their boilers licenses. So I had a pretty full schedule. Plus I was running 2 businesses, which I had employees for me at the same time. And I really loved teaching school. And again, what I did in school or what our programs were in school are completely different today. It's sort of like today, people are saying, oh, why aren't we training people to be electricians or masons? I said, where are you coming from? I said, I did that 40 years ago, and it was very successful. As a matter of fact, I visited last year. I visited the Niagara Orange Bowl. It's the first time that I was there, like in 30 years, and met the principal and had a long discussion with him. And next year, I'm setting up a scholarship for the air conditioning program, and it was pretty moving to go back. But I got to a point in teaching. I was at the top of the pay scale, and had some opportunities open up in New Mexico. So I put in for sabbatical, and I came out to New Mexico. And actually, the company I went to work for was closing. So I had to start all over again. So I started my own company, and I developed a program here in the state of New Mexico. Worked with the governor and with an ad hoc committee and the Senate and the House of Representatives, and passed some laws here that make construction a little bit easier. And I sold that company in 1997, and I sort of retired in 1997, but got tired of that. And I was traveling all over the world. I'm a big game hunter, and I've traveled to Africa 16 times, and Australia, New Zealand, South America, Alaska, and all that kind of stuff. And 2002, I got really tired, so I started in real estate development, and so now I do a lot of real estate development and own businesses and buildings that I lease to a variety of Fortune 500 companies. I'm also a consultant with Pizza Hut and a couple other restaurants, chain restaurants, that I help do logistics and property locations, and also redesigning of buildings. So 76 years old, and I still keep going at it. I love doing what I do. And then 5 years ago, I got involved with going out of the country in Panama and started a coffee business. And this year we're starting to get our first production after 5 years. And so now the coffee we sell goes to China, Hong Kong, and all over the Asian countries. So this last year I was on a whirlwind tour of Australia, Taiwan, China, Korea, and I've been there before, but now it was more for business and stuff like that. So, but I keep on going, and it all came from Trott. Like I said, I wouldn't have missed it. I don't think I missed a day in high school. I just enjoyed every single minute of high school as I can remember. So, but it was different, you know that. It was just different. The teachers were different. The purpose they were teaching was different. You know, when I was I had a very good principal when I was teaching school at BOCES. I also had 3 companies while I was teaching. And one of the companies I was working at, if you might remember, I was running security at the Love Canal when they closed it up. Mm-hmm. I was also had the maintenance contract over at Falcon Manor. So we had to maintain all of the refrigeration and furnaces and refrigerators and garbage disposals and all that kind of stuff. Well, I ran my class like they were in a training program for Sears and Roebuck being a service person. My boys would come, and girls would come to my class. They would change clothes. They would put a uniform on, gray pants, and they had a choice at the beginning of the year. We're going to go gray or we're going to go blue. And they would change into uniforms. And my room was at the far end of the building, and I had a driveway put in, and I had a service van. Now, you couldn't do this today. And I had the only phone. And Falcon Manor would call and say, we got a furnace out at 119 blah, blah, blah street. And I'd say, Glenn, you want to go fix a furnace? And he would leave class, jump in the vehicle, go down to Falcon Manor. We were on Saunders Hillman Road. We were about 5 miles from, and he would go. We didn't have cell phones, so he'd have to use a landline if he needed a problem to call me. He didn't have something that, and he couldn't take pictures to send it to me. And he would call me back, or he would come back. Yeah, I got it fixed. I know what it was. Or a refrigerator, or garbage disposal, or a light switch, but we called it shadowing, where these guys would go out and actually get physical work done and get the on-site experience and customer relation experience. Today, if I did that, they'd probably throw me in jail. But you know what? I had the highest placement setting for my seniors for 12 years of teaching. I had the highest attendance in classes. We used to put our attendance on the board, on the top of our door, 99.98%. And my philosophy to my guys were, if you're sick and you're on a gurney, make sure your mother brings you in on the gurney. You see? And it actually got to a point where I got reprimanded because we'd have guys that didn't want to go to homeschool. They would come to BOCES. And they said, no. You're not allowed to go to BOCES if you don't go back to homeschool. So I had to tell them, you got to go finish up your math. You got to go take your English and history classes in your other homeschool. Because what they would do is they would take people from North Tonawanda, Newport, Newfane, all of these schools, these component school districts, and those kids would come to school in the morning, and then they would get bused back to their home school and do that. Now, most of the seniors back then, a lot of the seniors would drive, and so they would come and they would drive to school. But it's an era that's gone by that we should be readdressing. I'm still in the construction business. I can't find people to work, can't find people that are qualified. And we're losing stuff. People think it just happens. A building just comes and appears someday, I guess. I don't know. They don't know that what's all behind somebody building a building or a business today. So it's just, it's very, very disheartening.
Listening to everything that you said right now, would you do anything differently?
Oh boy, would I do anything differently? I've had a varied employment history. I mean, I was a teacher, I'm an architect, an engineer, a business owner, a master plumber, electrician, real estate developer. No, farmer. I don't.
Probably not.
I think, yeah, I think the biggest thing, I think there's a lot of guys in my era, and this is just cliche kind of stuff, but we work to strive to do things for our family, and sometimes it became detrimental to the family. And it was just something the men said, well, I'm doing it for you, but then the family says, yeah, but you weren't here. And it's sort of like a double-edged sword. So I regret that, that it cost me a marriage. It's just the way it is. I just, and it's through a majority or a lot of people that were in business back in those days. And, it just, but I guess to get to the answer, I don't think there'd be anything that I would change. Not, I didn't tell you this, but one time I had an opportunity when I was head of business. I had a gentleman come over to sell me life insurance from New York Life. I had a little farm on Nash Road, and this guy comes to sell me insurance policy. And he said to me, he said, Larry, he came a couple, 3 times. He said, man, he says, you'd make a heck of an insurance salesman. And I got him to the point where I went to interview with the man downtown Buffalo and I forget what building was, but I remember it was the tallest building in Buffalo on the top floor. And boy, they laid out a plan to me back, when I look back at it now, it was just unbelievable. And I turned it down. And I said to myself, I says, maybe that was the only thing that I regret in business of doing or not doing. But again, if I would have done that, it would have offset the stuff that I did do. So, again, a double-edged sword. You go to the right or you go to the left. So
when you come to Niagara Falls and you drive by where Trott used to be, what kind of emotions go through you?
Matter of fact, I was there just last fall. The building still looks great. I gotta tell you, this one other thing about Trott. I don't know if you remember, we used to have to do the Marine Corps tests. You know, you had the gym, you had to do the sit-ups, and you had to do the push-ups, you had to do the pull-ups, and you had to run. Well, we didn't have any of that kind of, we would do it all in the gym, but when it comes to running, what we had to do is we had to go outside and run around the block. Okay. So we'd go down in groups, and guys would be down in the corner of the block. They'd be back there smoking on the corner. Yeah, we'll get there sooner or later. What the heck's the difference, you know? And I'd run by, and guys were over there smoking away, and there's cigarettes at that time. But it was kind of funny. We guys go around, and we had to run around the block to do those tests, you know. But I went down through there because my aunt used to live over on East Falls and 15th Street, right next to the big church. And all those buildings are gone. I could see the demise years and years ago in Niagara Falls when they blocked off Main Street and made it only walking. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. And but Niagara Falls has disintegrated. I mean, there's just, and it's sad. I mean, I used to do a lot of work for the people in Como restaurants and you know, a lot of that area. I'm not sure if you're familiar with all of the Niagara Falls area, but you had an Italian area, you had a Polish area, and they were very proud of their homes and stuff. But today, they're all dilapidated. Nobody takes care of stuff anymore. A lot of the old businesses are gone, which, you know, that's typical after 50 or 60 years of being in business. Some of them just, you know, pass away, or the children weren't interested in the buildings, the businesses, so they just let them go. But you know, I don't want to get political, but I just think it just got the government manhandled Niagara Falls. They took a diamond and they broke it up into pieces, and it's lost its value. That's why everybody goes to Niagara Falls, Ontario, because they know how to beautify their buildings and beautify their parks and make it a tourist attraction. And so everybody that goes, they come into Niagara Falls, say, "What am I doing here?" And they cross the border and into Canada, and away you go. But
all right, you've got the last word. Last question. What we talked about different things in this conversation so far. What haven't we talked about that you'd like to talk about right now?
Boy, let me just, I'm going to just, you know, I want to go back to the football days, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Okay. I don't know if you can see this.
Wow. Look at that. That you?
There's one. Yeah, that's me.
All right.
I got another one here. These go back a little ways.
Wow.
You know that picture. You know. And this is,
wow, look at you guys.
and you can see the helmets weren't probably and this was my this was my senior picture.
Wow.
So
you were a Babe magnet.
Well, I had one girlfriend back then. And like I said, you know, it was really funny because when I went off to college, we just sort of separated, and I didn't see her for many, many, many years. But her parents stayed very good friends of mine, and they moved, and I found out where they moved to. And then, I don't know, it was about 10 years ago, I found her mother in Pennsylvania. And she said, well, the gal's name was Kathy. Her name was Kathy Welch at the time. And she said, well, Kathy's living in Florida. That's where you got a phone number. And she gave me a phone number, and I called her. And so we started talking now and then. And then I had to go to Florida to visit a building properties that I was going to build. And so I met up with her, and we had lunch and stuff. So it was a pretty good reunion. And but it was a lot of fun. I mean, she's still there. And we just struck up a relationship back to being good buddies and friends. So, but the only thing I could say is, in conclusion, is that I hope whoever watches this and has children is, let them be children, let them be the people they can be. They'll follow. You don't have to mold them. If you're, when I was teaching, there was a gentleman named Ernie Stokowski who was the teaching director for the Los Angeles School District. And he set up a program at our school about how teachers can teach. It had nothing to do with curriculum. It just had to do with how you taught. And what he said is, never give a bad example. Always be positive example. And the other thing he said, and I tell this, I do some motivational speaking for my friend that owns 25 restaurants. I says, never use negative criticism. Always make it positive criticism. Don't put a person down. Use the words that you say in a positive light. You don't have to say, oh, never do it that way. But wouldn't you say more like, it might help if we tried a different approach at this, and maybe let's see what happens if we do it this way. Right. And I do that all the time. And it's I see in the industry today is that we don't have time to educate employees. We hope that they learn it by osmosis, and it doesn't work that way. I talked to a gentleman the other day, does air conditioning work? I says, why do they do this? Well, I have no idea. I said, how long have you been doing this? He says, 5 years. I said, did you go to school for air conditioning? No. He said, I learned everything on the job. I said, well, so once you learn something, if you learn it in the wrong way, you're going to keep on doing it the wrong way. So education is important, but more so that what you learn is you're learning it in the proper context. So it's a long process, and I could go into a lot of stuff because I used to do a little bit of psychology in regards to how the human mind works and what you learn and how you learn, and the issues of numbers, exactly how things work in your brain. But everybody just doesn't learn by somebody burning chalk on a chalkboard. So there's a whole different aspect that you have to look at, and we're not doing that anymore. We've lost the contact, just like we're doing right now. What we're doing right now is what teachers are doing, and you can't, like they say, reach out and touch that guy. You know what I'm saying? So it's and when you lose that respect of physical contact, I think you lose a whole different realm of understanding people and understanding education and understanding the goodness of life.
I got to respectfully disagree with you, because I think this conversation we're having right now is going to touch a lot of people. But Larry Kolek. Larry
I
Kolek,
hope-
this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time and taking us down the trip of your memory lane of Trott Vocational. I wish you well. I thank you so much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your life in New Mexico, my friend.
Thank you.